Hello, hello. I am Cassie Brown, and I am thrilled to welcome you to the Amplify My Impact podcast. After years of consulting and managing programs for some of the top entrepreneurs, CEOs, and marketers in the industry, I am on a mission to expand our contribution, to grow, scale, and create more so we can do and give more. This podcast celebrates entrepreneurs who are boldly stepping up to own their calling, expand their influence, and stretch outside their comfort zone, who've decided to stop playing it small, pick up the mantle of contribution, and serve at a higher level to lead by example and light the way for others. If that's you, then get ready to amplify. There's a fire that burns inside your soul, and we're going to ignite it into a roaring blaze of unstoppable momentum. Hey guys, welcome back to Amplify My Impact. I have an incredible guest joining us today. She is just an amazing author and podcast host of the Mary Marantz Show. And we're going to be just sharing her life stories, but we're also talking about the release of her first and new book, Dirt. Mm-hmm. So I am incredibly honored. We were just catching up before we started the podcast on, we both have backgrounds in photography and for years, ran in very similar circles, but we were never physically in the same place. Yeah. So it was really, really nice to catch up with her. She is the definition and epitome of an impact-driven entrepreneur. I have so much respect for the way that they serve in and out of their business in every aspect of life. So Mary, welcome on the show. I'm really, really excited for the listeners to get a chance to know you and experience your heart firsthand.
Oh, Cassie, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited. I see these all the time in my Facebook feed. And so I'm really excited to actually be one of them now. So Yay! Thank you. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, I'd like to, obviously we're going to talk about the podcast and about the book. But before we go there, can you share a little bit of your journey, from where you were to getting to where we are today, talking about this huge life accomplishment and so much that you've shared and inspired others?
Well, I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs who probably follow you will resonate with this. And that is, I did not go to school for the thing that I became when I grew up. I went, I did my undergrad in West Virginia, born and raised in West Virginia. We'll talk about that probably. And then a year in England to get my master's in philosophy, as you do. And my undergrad was political science and philosophy. And so there's not much you can do with that except go get a master's degrees in philosophy. There's not much you can do with that except go to law school or PhD program. And so law school it was. I moved to Connecticut to go to Yale for law school, only to become a wedding photographer for the next 15 years after I graduated. And so that's a really expensive way to become a wedding photographer. And just when we thought the pivots in my life couldn't get any more extreme, walked away from a very, very successful photography business to start a new career as an author as of June of last year. And so the book came out this year in September. And so it was a 5-book deal that I signed. So for the next at least 5 years, but probably the rest of my life, author. So that's a really meandering path to get where you end up. But I think most of us have taken that path, that meandering kind of cow path. You have no idea how it's going to get there, but somehow it does.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And holy smokes, I did not realize it was a 5-book deal. Yeah. And if you guys are listening and if you just hear Mary's heart and it shows up everywhere in her conversations, the way that she serves and her friends. I got the incredible opportunity to take part in the live launch. And it was just so heart feeling to see your interaction with the people who have been there with you every step of the way in creating the book, and just in the way that you interviewed, the way that they showed up, the way that is the definition of a life well lived. When you can touch people at the soul. Yeah,
I love that so much. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So kind of talk to us about that transition, because I think there's so many things that are very similar in the photography space when it comes to having that servant's heart and that capturing and encapsulating that legacy moment, that you may or may not have known that you've carried over in the relationships in the book and with the podcast and everything like that. Like, I feel like you just have a gift of connecting with people.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you. I love that word servant and service keeps coming up because I am married to somebody who's way better than I am, to be honest with you. Justin is he really is just that servant hearted person. His love language is service. Which and mine is gifts. So we get into a lot of conversations about like, when are you going to be romantic? Well, what are you talking about? I like cooked you 3 meals and, folded the laundry or what have you. So, and that's him talking to me, by the way. And so I feel like I've gotten to live, we will be married 13 years on October 13th, which is as we're filming this next week. And I feel like I've gotten like a masterclass, like a firsthand 13-year masterclass in what it looks like to serve people well and to love people through serving them. And I have felt my own, character and heart and just, thinking of other people first change just from doing life with him. So I really feel like when that word service keeps coming up, I got to give that credit to Justin first, as sort of leading the way with that.
That's awesome. You two are such an incredible couple and example. And yeah, I love the way that he just champions and supports it. I know for a fact in you and in your life, but I've seen him do it in others.
Yeah.
And I think it's just amazing. So talk to us about transitioning into podcast hosts. Like, what was that like? Was it scary? Because this is a new, I mean, even today, like I feel like I watched Gary Vee deliver, a keynote where someone asked, what's the future? And he said voice. And that was about 3 or 4 years ago. But still, I think podcast there's still so much growth and opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so I like to call myself, the reluctant podcaster, which if we ever have to rebrand, I'm super calling it that, by the way. So Justin was really, honestly, to his credit again, was just the one saying like, you really need to do this. We were about a year out from, at the time he was telling me we were about 1.5 years out, even almost 2 years from the book coming out. And we were still kind of pitching the proposal when he really first started talking about it. And he said, I just feel like you'd be really good at this. And I feel like it's where you're being called. And I think it's important for getting people to start thinking of you as an author and a thought leader, and not only as a photographer, as you're sort of making that, pivot. All I can think of is like Ross Geller and the stairwell pivot. And so he was really kind of the one who encouraged it. And for a long time, I was like, I don't know. Probably out of just like that fear, but also overwhelm at like not knowing all the steps. And like, can we add something else to our plate? And we kicked off the podcast September 4th, 2019, and I am in love with it. It is, second to writing, my favorite thing to do because I get to sit down with people and immediately skip over the surface and have deep conversations and ask curious questions. And, I just kind of, as an introvert, that's sort of like the dream life for me. Like, I just kind of get to like hang out and talk to people one-on-one and have conversations that I think have impact. Because I always say like cocktail hour conversation and like surface is my kryptonite. That if you want to see me shut down really fast, put me in a cocktail hour at a conference and I'll be in my room at the hotel within like 15 minutes. But if I can go grab a couple people off to the side and have deep conversations, I can do that all night long. So this has kind of been sort of a very unexpected dream come true. And I feel like it is something that will be in one form or another, as this medium probably adapts, as all mediums tend to do. I feel like it'll be in my job and my life moving forward.
That's awesome. I do you feel like, I think in certain aspects through my own growth, like there's just something that you never really knew existed until you experience it. Right.
Totally.
Did you feel that in transitioning into podcasts? Like, I love and appreciate, like you said, taking like those deep conversations. And I think that's the one thing that the medium of podcast gives us is like you said, that opportunity to enrich our lives and have more and share. Everyone has a different, like, I believe everyone was created for a purpose and they have a different, unique, innate superpower within them. And sometimes it's a little quiet but the more and more and more something's done, it's revealed. And so like,
Yeah.
did you feel that as a process when you were
Oh,
transitioning?
totally, totally. So I love this question, Cassie, because two things. One, my producer, Elizabeth, is like famous for saying to me over and over again, audio is the most intimate of mediums because, and a lot of times we're in their earbuds, in their ears as they're on a walk or a run or what have you, or maybe it's playing in their kitchen. But like, there's just something about this medium of audio as opposed to like passively watching something on TV, maybe, or what have you, where it's almost like we're having a conversation with somebody else, but it's almost like we're having a conversation with that listener. And what's really interesting is that I think God is really good at leaving little breadcrumbs throughout our lives, little glimpses of where we're headed that do not make any sense at all at the time. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. When I was in grade school, I was in this, and I talk about this in Dirt. I got, accepted into this gifted program where once a week we would go, about 6 of us, and we would have these advanced classes. And I remember specifically we had to go around in a circle and read some passage from some book. That's very specific, by the way, some passage from some book. But the specific part I remember is our teacher, Mrs. McClung, just stopping the whole room when it was my turn to read. And she was like, wow, Mary, there's just something about your ability to read out loud. And I was like, that is such a random thing to be complimented on, but okay. Fast forward 15 or 20 years, and I'm doing the reading at a friend's wedding. And it's like First Corinthians, the typical reading situation. And afterwards at the reception, like literally every single guest came up to me and they were like, that's the best reading I've ever heard. And I was like, what's happening? I don't think professional wedding reader is really a job I can like get into. And this was before we were ever doing wedding photography. That wasn't even on the radar. And then I did another friend's wedding, same thing in England. And like the English people were just, I read The Velveteen Rabbit at that one. And they were just going on and on about like, oh my goodness, I've never heard such a good reading, which accents I do not have a superpower for, but apparently reading things or speaking out loud. Then it starts to transition into being a speaker at a conference or, I don't know, like doing webinars, things like that. And the common thread was there is just something about listening to you. And there's just something about your storytelling. And like all of those things were building to me actually having a job, saying things out loud that I could have never wrapped my head around in the form of podcasting and reading my own audiobook. And so we're here and finally it's like, oh, I get it, God. I mean, and I'm sure there's many more moments to come. But the point is, just because something doesn't make sense right now, or it doesn't feel like it could be a job long-term or actually pay the bills long-term, don't discount those glimpses where people are saying back to you, or they're mirroring back to you, this is something you are uniquely and especially good at. It stands out to me that you're gifted in this area. Don't just like throw that off to the side like, well, that's great, but I don't know how to ever like get paid for that or have a job as that. Pay attention to those, gifts people are calling out into you because I feel like they're glimpses of your purpose.
Oh, that's beautiful. And it's so true. And I'm geeking out over here because I was part of the gifted program too.
Yes.
Like,
was yours called GATE, Gifted and Talented Education?
No, it was just the gifted program.
Yeah.
And we were like in a really super small town, like crazy
Ditto.
small town, 1 square mile, like,
Wow.
and we had a small class too. And it's so funny because like, it's not like I go introducing myself and like, hey, I was in the gifted program. But when it comes up in conversation with some people, they were like, you were in what? What was like, I think it's just, it's conversations that turn like nostalgia about like being in high school and being and like, I was blessed to have this incredible teacher in my life, Miss Cushman, since 2nd grade.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing. And so I love that you had that opportunity for someone to recognize the greatness right there. And even though you can't connect the dots, we have people in our lives that come through and it's almost like they're the ones that dot the I's and they cross the T's, like to keep us going and push it, or just like that little nudge, you know?
Yeah.
So, and I get from you, like, that's one of your superpowers is nudging people in the right direction and sort of like helping them reveal and open certain doors. Yeah. So can you share some of that? Like what is, how has this become part of your mission and leveraging, what you are here with your purpose to do and to create?
Yeah, I think that what you are seeing there, Cassie, or picking up on is another one of those random gifts that we saw emerge in different ways. A lot of times we would see it in mentoring sessions, one-on-one mentoring sessions, or we would see it in the kind of like group discussion parts of workshops where we sort of like jokingly in the beginning called it my Miss Cleo. Do you remember those like commercials for Miss Cleo, the like psychic, where she just, it was just this ability to kind of hear what was being said, hear what was not being said, and connect the dots between what was really going on. And so, it's this ability to go, hey, I hear you saying this, I hear you saying that, I hear you not saying this. It kind of feels like maybe this is not even the business you want to be building. And like we've had a ton of people come into us thinking that they wanted to build one thing and they end up building something very different because they were doing that thing because they thought they were supposed to. And I think there's a really good rule in life and in business is if ever you are doing something because you feel like, what am I supposed to do? What is everyone else doing? You are probably already on the wrong path. And so, we saw that play out in those ways. And then, even on the podcast, when we have other guests on who've been interviewed a ton and they're maybe speakers and coaches themselves, we have heard across the board, this is one of their favorite interviews because I'm asking questions that they have not been asked 100 times before. Because, I've read the book, I'm hearing what they're saying, I'm connecting what they're not saying, I'm referencing back to stuff they've already said in their book, whatever the case may be. And so there is a part of my brain that comes alive in those moments, whether it's in an interview or in a mentoring session. I kind of describe it as like a white hot orb of light in like the center of my brain that just like truly lights up when I am like pointing someone to their purpose. And that's what I think that's another thing. So like, and by the way, some of these like bullet points I'm rattling off, like I first heard from Paula Ferris in her book called Out. What are those gifts people keep referencing back to you? That's from Paula Ferris. What are those things that you just truly like come alive doing them? That's Paula Ferris talking about that. And also like that, they truly serve other people. Oh, there you go. Exactly. Exactly. So like she really breaks that down into like a 3-step model of finding your purpose, stuff you love, stuff other people keep calling out in you, and stuff that like, it's not just about you, it's about other people. And for me, there's just something that comes alive in me that I couldn't ignore anymore about what happens when you're actually helping somebody realize their purpose, be pointed to their purpose. When you see in them what they haven't even necessarily been able to see in themselves. And you can call that a teacher's heart. You can call that a coach's heart. You can call that an entrepreneur's heart. But I think it's really like one of our purposes here on this earth is to walk together, to spend time and community with one another so that we can be mirrors, not microscopes to one another. And so I think it's important, everybody listening, to learn that difference early and often. The microscopes in your life will hold you in place for closer scrutiny. They'll hold you in one place where you are for closer scrutiny. Picture those like old school, microscopes with the that snap in on a little slide. I'm going to hold you in one place so I can really scrutinize you. I don't want you moving. I don't want you changing. It's a lot easier for me if you just stay put and don't grow, actually. So stay here and let me continue to like pick you apart into little pieces. Mirrors, on the other hand, will say, I'm going to hold up a reflection in front of your face. I'm going to show you who you are, who you've always been, and who you're becoming. And we're going to be okay with that becoming part because we were not created to stay in one place or one form. I think we can get really deep here, but the Bible talks a lot about the potter and the clay and like reshaping that and like making something out of it. And that was pretty good, but let's see if we can do something better. Same clay, different shape.
Yeah, that was a beautiful analogy. And I totally ordered the book after I saw her on the interview that you did with her. And
nice.
When, I have an unapologetic appreciation for people who authentically share, like vulnerable, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
Because I think, and I know, like, you coming from the photography industry, and it's honestly like I've seen it in the digital marketing industry. I tell people all the time, like, it's not industry specific.
Mm-hmm.
There are really so many people who are really good about keeping the mask on and making something look easy, or having a repeatable like system that just refuses to go beyond the surface.
Yep.
Right.
Yes.
And I personally think that's a disservice to other people,
Mm,
because there is a lot of pain and there's a lot of struggle, but there's also a lot of growth in the pain and the
yeah.
struggle.
Yeah.
So I have not, I ordered the copy of Dirt. I haven't received my book yet, so I can't wait to read it. But I know just in hearing people share and reading the reviews and the song, oh my gosh, the song that you guys shared.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
How good is that? Caleb Peavy and his wife Anna did a duet from the perspective of
yeah,
me and my dad about the book Dirt, inspired from the book Dirt. And there was not a dry eye in the house when
yeah.
we premiered that at the launch party. And then again, on social media. And it actually came out Friday, October 2nd. It's available for streaming anywhere. So you can go on Spotify or wherever you listen to music and just search for Dirt from Caleb Peavy. Just listen to it. I mean, if you have a soft spot for fathers and daughters, like you
Mhm.
need this song in your life. It's so good.
Yeah. So I want to kind of give you an opportunity to share. I know you've been on a book tour,
Yeah.
but so I know there's things that you like to talk about, you like to share, but what is something that you haven't been able to share yet? Just
Yeah.
because that question hasn't been asked.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a good question. We've gotten some really great questions. So let me think about this for a second. Something that I have not been asked. I would say that a lot of people don't necessarily know to get into talking about my grandma Goldie, because if we're doing the interview and they've only gotten to maybe watch the book trailer, or they've only gotten to read like the first little bit, then they might not know just how much of a character, in every sense of the word, Grandma Goldie is. So she was 5'2", and I say a towering force in our family tree. One part firecracker, one part sassafras. Her two favorite sayings were, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And in case you didn't know it, I'm the dang Roman. And I'll do it myself. I'll do it myself. And she was my best friend, and there are so many studies that say if just one adult will take an interest in a child's life, if just one adult will say, hey, this is where you are, but this is not where you're going to stay. This is not where you're going. This is not what you're capable of. That one adult taking an interest in a child's life can change the entire trajectory of their life. And I had a few adults like that in my life, but Grandma Goldie was definitely the one who thought I could do no wrong. And there's this really interesting part in Dirt we get into where I say, the way that Goldie looked at me kind of felt like she'd gotten some like rose-colored glasses. I say like out of a cereal box, like Captain Crunch maybe, or Lucky Charms. And when we would be out somewhere and she'd be introducing me, the things that she saw in me, that I was kinder and more generous and more thoughtful and more well-behaved than I knew that I was, it made me really uncomfortable. And I said, Grace is a lot like that for me. Here's God looking at me, introducing me as these things: blessed, adopted, chosen, loved. And I'm looking around wondering who he's talking about. And there's this especially I think for people who didn't grow up with a lot, there's this switch that gets flipped in us where we start to feel like we were raised that you do not accept anything for free. And here's eternity being offered to us without any strings attached. And so the way that Goldie looked at me was sort of like an earthly glimpse of the way that God looks at us, as better than we are. Because when we have that grace on us, we're looked at through these eyes of love that see like who we could be and who we're becoming and the good in us. And I think so many of us, if you have hard parts in your story, you are not used to being looked at that way. The world doesn't tend to look at people who come from stories that have a little bit of mud on their hands or dirt under their fingernails as what we're capable of and who we're becoming. They just see where we started. And so I think that that's probably one of the things that I would love to kind of like get into more in these conversations, is the power of having one person on this earth who sees you that way, especially when you're a child. And if you are sitting there listening and you're like, I really didn't have anybody like that who saw me that way or told me that, you always did. You always had a God who saw you as all of these things: adopted, chosen, beloved, a child of his, that he saw the good things in you and the things that you're becoming. And so I think that's probably one of the more powerful things that I get into in the book that people haven't necessarily asked about too much. And I talk about losing Goldie and what grief looks like and what it looks like to get so busy trying to be busy and important that you are not there in the final moments. So Grandma Goldie's quite the little character, big character, capital C character throughout the book. And I think as more and more people read the book, she'll come up more, I would say.
I think that's beautiful. And you had just a short little phrase there that I think is not something that we should miss. You just mentioned busy and important.
Mm.
And I feel that priority shifts in the way that we grow in our journey and the way that we grow in our purpose. So how has that lens shifted for you from being busy and important?
I think busy and important are both Band-Aids. When you break free of something and you decide you're going to go chase a dream, it leaves some wounds, just the tearing away leaves some open wounds. And we tend to want to, rather than just letting those wounds of, I'm afraid this won't work out, I'm fearful that I might fail. Not only am I fearful that I might fail, but I'm fearful that I might fail and fall on my face, and other people who I love and respect will watch me fall on my face. That's the real fear when we talk about failure. It's not just failing, it's that other people might see us fail. Those wounds kind of get ripped open as we break away and we're shedding outer skins and we're becoming new versions of ourselves. There's a part in Dirt where I talk about, people always talk about the caterpillar and they go, oh, just when the caterpillar thought her life was ending, she became a butterfly. And I know that's supposed to be inspiring, but all I can ever think is, I bet it hurts the caterpillar. And when a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, they don't just grow wings out of their back, which would be painful enough. They actually disintegrate into caterpillar soup. They completely melt away. The sort of death to self before the thrill of hope takes flight. And so, when I think about that, these wounds of trying something new and breaking away and moving into new versions of ourselves and just wounds of becoming, honestly, we tend to slap Band-Aids on it of, look how busy I am. Look at these important things that I'm doing. Look at these people that I'm hanging out with. Let me casually mention these successful things. Let me humble brag my way into security, not because I want to make you feel bad, but because I'm just perpetually trying to convince myself it's okay. It's like that sweatshirt. I'm fine. That's fine. Everything's fine. And the more we kind of say, well, look how busy I am. Well, look how much activity is occurring. What we're really kind of doing is spiraling ourselves up into burnout. We're kind of losing that purpose and that why that we started in the first place, because the more we can pack our calendars full, the more we can pack our schedules full, the more we can pack our Instagram full of highlight reels, that's all numbing activity. And it allows us to kind of ignore what we might really be afraid of, or what might really be hurting, or what might not be working, or what we're afraid might not be working. And so I would say busy and important, we need to just stop. Stop trying to be busy as a way of being important. Stop trying to be busy to the point that you don't deal with what needs to be dealt with. And stop worrying about whether people think you're important, because no matter how important you become, there will always be people who try to make you feel small. And start asking yourself, how do I walk into this situation and not impress people with all the things that I've done? How do I leave an impact on them? So not impress, but impact. And one of my favorite quotes is that, confidence is quiet, insecurity is really loud. Insecurity is loud, confidence is quiet, I think is how it goes. My very favorite quote, apparently, but it's something to that effect. And that is something I've seen play out in our lives over and over and over again. The more truly successful we became, and I'm not just talking about income or, outward appearance of success. I'm talking about having a life that feels better on the inside than it looks on the outside. The more truly successful we became, the less we felt we had to talk about it, the less we felt we had to be really loud about it. We want to talk about it to the extent of helping other people get there. But there's just this, as soon as there's true success, this confidence just allows you to kind of say, I don't need you to know X, Y, and Z about me before I can feel important enough to talk to you. I'm a human, you're a human. Let's just talk about it. Let me see if I can help along the way, and be open to being helped along the way as well.
I love that. I feel like it's a rite of passage and maturity when you start to shift that lens of, I don't need you to give me that opinion or that permission of my worth.
Yeah.
I am already worthy.
Yeah. There's a part in Dirt, I should say, one of my I don't know. I have so many favorite parts at this point. I always say one of my favorite parts of Dirt. But one of my favorite parts of Dirt is I'm talking about this really long stage that I went through where I felt like my accomplishments and achievements had to like introduce me into the room. Like I had a butler announcing me into a room, and I really conjured up scenes of Dwight Schrute from The Office when like they're welcoming Robert California and he dresses in like the top hat and tails. Jim, John Krasinski, Jim's character convinces him that's how to be fancy. And he's like, Mr. and Mrs. James Halpert. So I feel like I had a butler like that. And my butler had to tell people this laundry list of things I had done, including Yale, including where we'd photographed, including like how successful our business had been. Not because I wanted to like bowl them over, but because I didn't feel like I would even be worthy of their time until they knew those things. Like I would feel like a waste of their time until they knew those things. And, when it felt like my butler took a day off, then I had to take on that job. And suddenly I'm just like, you feel it rising up, and it's like orange juice meets like 3-day-old milk meets battery acid, like in your throat. And you're like trying to like push it back down. But before you know it, there's just sort of like that word vomit of, let me tell you all these things so that you're not wasting time on me.
Yeah.
And the second you can let go of that and you can say, none of those things made me more worthy as a human. I was worthy of that conversation. I was worthy of that person's time just in virtue of being another human on planet Earth.
Yeah.
As soon as you can start to separate yourself from like, none of these things will ever fill that hole and make you feel worthy. There's no arrival on that point. There is no arrival. There is no crosshair intersection of permission and waited her turn laundry list of successes that will suddenly make you feel like super worthy to be in any situation. If you have that hole in your heart, it will continue to be there.
Right.
And so for me, filling that hole, and we can get into this if that's where you want to go, that truly came back to like, if none of that stuff existed, if all of that was stripped away, who is Mary separate from all of these accomplishments? Where does the identity that I like, that solid ground I stand on, truly come from? Because any one of these things could disappear in a minute. And we were talking about that before you hopped on. Like you, above anyone, knows how much life can change in a minute.
Yeah. I would love to go there. Okay. I just have one more question that I really wanted to get to, but I definitely want to go down that pathway that you opened up with that, because I think it's important for people to realize, and even and called out. I think that was the biggest thing. Who are we if our identity rests in what we do? Yeah. Because like when you strip all of that away, like if you've put all of your value and your worth in that specific direction, you've got a big hole. You've got a big hole, and nothing's going to feel it until you make that shift in your perspective.
Yeah. There's this scene where I talk about when people say hole in the heart, I was like, I don't even think that fully captures it for me. For me, it was more like I was walking around with like a root canal the size of a chest wound. I was like, it's like in that scene, Death Becomes Her, where you can see all the way through Goldie Hawn, where guts and backbone should have been. It's just nothing. And that, all of those, like, picture that, like, really conjured up that, like, root canal aspect, all of those exposed roots screaming, those nerve endings firing on, full display. And, that most of the time you could walk around and totally forget that it felt like people could see right through you. And then the temperature would change in the room and all of those nerve endings would start screaming again, just feeling like that girl in the trailer from a mountain in West Virginia, walking around the halls of Yale Law School, which is, we haven't even really like gotten to that. That's sort of the synopsis of Dirt, is single wide trailer in West Virginia to Yale Law School. And this journey of how achieving will never, ever give you your worth. There's no amount of success you can chase. If Yale Law School didn't do it for me, if I still felt like I had a chest wound, root canal the size of a chest wound after getting into the number one law school in the country, no amount of gold stars and brand name labels and backfilling. I said it was kind of like I was trying to backfill that hole with brand name labels and gold stars. No amount of that is gonna fill what's missing. And that whole section kind of goes through, there's like all of these analogies about root canals and, silence the exposed roots and talking about trying to like fill that hole. And I keep going and I say, it's sort of like I was treating God like a Pez dispenser, like just keep the candy coming, God, like hit after hit of this sugary, sweet high of getting everything I ever wanted, this manna of more. Never mind that God was trying to talk to me about how anemic my faith had become or what would truly nourish, what would truly last. I just wanted to keep that sugary, sweet high coming, which is why it would make sense that in the years to come, it was not a filling, but an extraction that I would need most. And that extraction is everything I'd put into my life, this like buttercream frosting I had slathered on top of my life because I thought it was more presentable or desirable or palatable. When really what people are trying to get to, and we were talking about this before, is that crumbly center of the cake inside, right? Like we layer on layer after layer of buttercream frosting because we think it's going to be something that attracts people to us, but it's just far too sweet to be real. You know, we need that mask to come off. We need that cape to come off. We need somebody to sit down across from us and go, it turns out I can't leap tall buildings after all. Will you still love me anyway? So yeah, I think that's the process. That's the process is let me start extracting everything I've added simply because I thought it would be impressive. And let me only edit down to what remains is that leaves an impact that I truly feel like helps people and that sets me on fire to go do it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, in that process of sharing, because I feel like you're so well spoken. You do have such a talent, in the written word as well. So what was the process like in writing the book? Like, can you kind of walk us through, because to me, like when I think about like, just there's so many facets of digging deeper and reliving those scenarios, like those hurtful scenarios and going back through those places. It's like you willingly have to walk through the pain again, but still organize it in a way that it makes sense to bring somebody with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, anybody who's watching and they're thinking, I would like to write a book, I highly, highly, highly recommend reading Bird by Bird from Anne Lamott. I had somebody recommend that to me and it was game changing. If for nothing else, and there are many, many else's, but if for nothing else, that she makes you feel normal when you feel absolutely crazy writing this book. Because most of the time you're just like, she talks about like you sit down at the chair and you like, fidget a little and you decide to go organize your closet. And then you sit back down and you just shake your hands at the ceiling. Why, God, why? Like it is, man, one of the worst feelings in the world is writer's block for sure. And there is this like birthing process. And a lot of my writing process involves, there's that whole adage, you have to like sit your butt in the chair long enough for the words to come. You don't just write when inspiration strikes. And so a lot of times it would just start with like a word or like a turn of phrase that would just sort of like flash, like a slide advancing right in your head for just a second. And it's like, oh, maybe there's something there. And then that turn of phrase becomes like a sentence fragment or maybe a whole sentence. And then, well, maybe we could get a couple more lines to be friends with that one. Now we have a paragraph and then, a couple paragraphs, section by section. It was like this birthing process of getting those words on the page. And for me, going back to what you're saying about going through some really painful things that anybody who's listening or watching and you maybe grew up with some hard things in your story, you may be like me where you've become really good at being like, let's put that in a little box over here and we'll deal with that when we're 80. I do not want to deal with that right now. And so in a lot of ways, writing this book was the, epitome of Pandora's box. And so draft one was a really hard process. Draft one was a much angrier, more bitter, just like really like sharp version of this story. Because for me, it was the first time I was getting it out on the page. So I like to say draft one was for me. And then, what sort of happened through that process of getting that out on the page for the first time was I turned it in first draft. There was like a day before my editor could get back to me. And I got what I've been calling like my Christmas Carol moment of, I saw a future that I didn't like. I saw a future with that version of the book on shelves. And I sort of woke up, like, oh my gosh, is it still Christmas? Yeah, is it Ebenezer Scrooge? Is it still Christmas morning? Do I have a chance to fix this? And so draft two becomes a really good adage for writing is your draft should go through true, truer, and truest versions of itself. So what I wrote in draft one was true. There was nothing about it that was not true. It was just my perception, my story of what happened. So truer is like, well, let me ask the other people involved, their version of events. And then truest is, what does this story say in light of what God says about me, who God says that I am? And so going through those versions, draft two, the one that you'll hold when the book arrives, that is a story dripping with grace. That is a story where I not only find my way to empathy for little Mary, who I was really good at putting all the things that happened in a little box over here that we'll deal with when we're 80, but never once saying, okay, let's sit down and let me tell you how sorry I am that these things happened. I spent my life screaming at that version of me saying, run harder, run faster, let's get going, achieve, perform, accomplish, do, be, in order to be loved. And finding what my way to empathy for little me to sit down cross-legged across from me and say, enough with the running, enough with the performing, enough with the achieving, enough with the gold stars. You are worthy of love just as you are. That was huge. And then the second wave that was really huge for me was finding my way to that same empathy for my parents, realizing that there was a little version of them as well. And that they, in many ways, had a harder story than I did. And so I think going through that version, those two versions of this story and kind of just digging deeper and leaning in closer with curiosity and empathy and always returning to grace. That is how I walked through this story that was very hard to unbox. And I asked myself and challenged myself, most stories like this, humble beginnings to Ivy League, there are a lot of stories out there like that. Most of them at the end of the story, there's estrangement. They don't talk to their families anymore.
Right.
And I asked myself, could a story like this be written and a family actually be drawn closer together? Could there actually be healing through the process of writing a book like this?
Yeah.
And I think that's what we did. And that's been probably the biggest gift of all.
Oh, that's amazing. That was definitely one of my questions is it's got to be hard because even as a parent now, like I had a little spat with my daughter the other day. Like she was having some trouble in school and I was trying to explain something to her and she, it escalates quickly. Right. And literally I'm arguing with her, but I'm also processing how will this affect her? Mm. How is she experiencing this moment? Right. Because I know I carry things from my past, like with experiences of my parents and adults and everything like that. So I'm always conscious of how is she going to relive this moment right here? Mm-hmm. So was there some healing that you were able to do with your parents and with your dad?
Oh man, that's, I love this question so much because I think about this all the time where, gosh, we'll be having a bad day or something like that. And I'll be like, I'm really glad we have dogs and that this, wasn't a part of a kid's life, all of a sudden. And I always make the joke about it's sort of like a Taylor Swift situation, don't raise authors because they'll write all your stories someday. But the truth of the matter is every single parent, and I'll be raising my hand first, if we are ever able to start a family, there's not a doubt in my mind that every single parent has those marks that they leave on their kids in those moments where they're like, oof, wish I would have done that better. And when we had Ian Morgan Cron on the show, who is amazing, by the way, highly recommend him for your show. He wrote The Road Back to You. And I'd done some stuff with the Enneagram before, but I hadn't read his book until then. And it really changed how I think about the Enneagram, first of all, but also about our stories and our childhoods and the childhoods of generations to come. And he said, the Enneagram is not a hardwired type. You are not born to be an achiever or a peacemaker or a perfectionist. The Enneagram is the mask you put on when you were little in reaction to any kind of childhood trauma, even minor traumas, that says, this is who I have to become in order to be loved. And so for me, that's some combination of achiever and being very, very original individualist. So I'm like a 3-4, almost split down the middle. And he said, I'm going to tell you right now, I have let go of any illusions that I won't give my kids some reason to put on a mask. He said, every single parent, even if they're the best, most healthy, whatever parent in the world, there are going to be moments when a kid is going to start to learn through these external, it's kind of like when they first start to understand the outside world and interact with the external stimuli of the outside world, they're going to pick up beliefs about who they have to become in order to be loved. And he said, our job is just to continue to walk them back to health. So if we do have these moments of, gosh, that escalated quickly, that's really not what I wanted it to be, never underestimate the power of, in the moment or as soon after as possible, to saying, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Will you forgive me? That's called the 9 hardest words in the English language, right? I am sorry. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I don't think that's 9. There's some version of that where it's 9. I'm sorry. I was wrong. Will you forgive me? Maybe we'll something like that. The 9 hardest words.
Yeah.
And just to even like in the moment, just be like, Clarissa Explains It All or Zach Morris style, like TV timeout, or let's go back to that. Like, here's kind of where I was coming from. Here's what was making me feel that way. Like, I just want you to know in the moment, that thing, that doesn't say anything about how worthy of love you are. You are loved unconditionally. I think there's so much power in that. And the more we can kind of do those in the moment, they become scratches, not deep scars.
Yeah.
So I would say hop off this and go have that conversation with her.
Oh, we did. We did.
Yeah.
Because it was over a test grade. And I was like, whoa. I want you to understand, like, it doesn't need to be perfect.
Yeah.
But this one in particular was a 0. So like we were discussing it.
Yeah. That's going to bring up a discussion. What Enneagram are you, Cassie?
It's funny because I'm a high achiever as well. And I've taken the test several times and I always end up around a 3 as well. And I don't know if you're anything like me, but it's like, it's almost like you're in denial. Like if you're wrestling, and that's what everyone has said, like if you're wrestling with the way that it identified, it's like, that's probably right.
Yeah.
Because I love to serve and I love to lift others up and I don't require the spotlight. And so like those to me are what stood out in a 3 because it was everything I'm trying not to be. Yeah. But at the same time, I am extremely driven. Like, in your story, you made it to Yale. I didn't make it to Yale, but I went straight through. I graduated early. I got my MBA. I started working in corporate America when I was 19, right? Yeah. Wow. And I've been going ever since because like you said, it's just not enough. Like, what's the next thing I can do? What's the next thing I can create? What's the next thing that I can achieve?
Yeah.
So I've been coming to the reality of that.
There's like this running joke that it's like everybody in the Enneagram world wants to be a 3 except for 3s who read the description and they're like, that sounds horrible.
Exactly.
Like, that sounds terrible. I don't want to be that person. Yeah. Yeah.
Honestly, I softened up around it when it was actually during your launch party when you were like, I think you had said it in passing, I'm a 3. And then a few guests, and I was like, but they're so nice and generous and graceful. Like maybe, because we look at all of the harsh things.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's, and like, in Ian's book, he talks about how some 3s, they can walk into a room and they're like social chameleons and they will become who they know they have to be in order to win in that room. And they'll like be very surface and work the room. And they do not focus on like originality or excellence. They just want to get the goal checked off so they can achieve something else and move on. And I was like, I do not resonate with any of that. Originality, one of my highest values. Authenticity, one of my highest values. Excellence, one of my highest values. Deep, going deep in conversations. And so that's where I think a lot of my 4 comes in, is that like, it's like I must have the best goals and the most original goals, and that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. So I'm slowly learning, to say, hey, like, how do I use this very driven nature to help other people? Like you were talking about, like Natalie Frank in the launch team in the launch event was talking about when a 3 can use their 3 drivenness to actually like help other people achieve their goals. That's when they're really living in that superpower, in that like healthy place. That's
where it all came together for me, because that's where I'm activated the most. Yeah. And that's where like I'm driven personally, but you put me in front of somebody that I know that I can help, or I can, shift into, their purpose or a world of possibilities, then, I mean, there's no stopping me. And like, for me, that's the preference of my attention. Yeah. And it's very, very hard for me to do that internally because I would rather do it for other people. Yeah. So,
you know what? I'll tell you this, as I'm like listening to this conversation, and I already told you authenticity is one of my highest values. So this is not blowing smoke. I really, really feel like when this book comes in, carve out a day and a half, whatever, and sit down with it, because a few things you're saying. So I always tell people, I got asked this question when we were pitching the proposal and publishers were like, well, who is this book for? And I said, she is the most put together woman in the room. She is the woman, whether it's like how she's dressed or her leadership or her success, or that she's speaking or she's inviting people into the room. She's the social butterfly, whatever it is. She is the woman you would look at and you would never guess there was hard stuff in her story. And so as you're talking about small town and being in the gifted program and like all of these achievements and like that sort of switch that gets flipped in you when there's something in your story that says, you will never go do great things. And you say, now it is my life mission to go do these great things, to prove you wrong or to prove the world wrong or to prove nobody wrong, but this thing that I told myself. There's this part of Dirt, and you've probably heard it if we're on the launch event and that stuff, where I talk about this girl in a red cape running out of the deep, dark woods, the wolf, big bad wolf ripping at her heels. She knows if she stops, it just might kill her. But when you look back over your shoulder, breathless and wild-eyed, you realize I'm the girl in the red cape running from my story, but I'm also the wolf. And that voice telling me I can never stop, that voice is mine. And so I feel like this book, what we're hearing from people is that it's a very healing experience. Even if you did not grow up in a trailer, even if you did not do something as extreme as the Ivy League, we all have those things in our story. We think we have to outachieve. We have to run from failure, so we stumble into success. And so I want you to like, as soon as you get it, just like carve out some time for you and read this book, because I feel like you in particular is really going to speak to.
Well, thank you. I'm really, really excited. I'm counting down the days. The other books that I ordered they came first. So I've dove into those. I read about a book a week.
Wow.
So I know we were at the top of the hour. I just have one more question if you have time for it.
Yeah.
I really am curious about, of all of the chapters in there, which one was the hardest for you to write?
I'm going to give you two answers because they were hard for very different reasons. So, I'm going to it's going to be like a two answers with like, this is the lawyer in me, subpoint A, subpoint B. So answer one, subpoint A, subpoint B. A would be chapter 7. And then the B kind of like 1-2 punch is chapter 8. Chapter 7 is called These Scars We Bear. And chapter 8 is called Leaving as a Suitcase. And those are sort of like, the whole book is divided into two parts, the girl in the trailer, the girl after the trailer. Part 1 is sort of like the ripping open of the wounds, where you understand where woundedness came from and brokenness came from and hard parts in my story came from. And then part 2 is where those things get redeemed. And I talk about all the ways, these crazy, mysterious, like insane ways that God redeemed the story over and over and over again. But chapter 7 is talking about some really hard things in my story, regarding, dating and domestic violence, sexual abuse, things like that. Chapter 8 is talking about my mom leaving when I'm little. And just to tell those stories was really hard to get on paper. That was like, we are going to a really wounded place where now everyone come into the room, now I shall get really naked. That's sort of those two chapters. And those are just hard for obvious reasons, like putting words to, and like walking that balance for a reader of, I'm telling you this because there's a purpose in it. I'm telling you this because there's healing to be found here. I am not doing this just to create a misery memoir where I tell you hard thing after hard thing after hard thing. And I'm going to walk that balance of putting you in that hard place, and we're going to stay there just long enough to feel it, but not just like assaulting people with really horrible, terrible things for no good reason. And so that's subpoint 1 and A and B. And then the second answer that was really hard for me to write, just because it was the journey of writing this book and becomes the journey of the book itself, is arriving at this place of, suddenly the whole perception shifts and you see it from that person's side. And there's understanding and empathy where this stark landscape of bitterness used to reside. This kaleidoscope of color on a undisturbed sheet of white snow starts to glow in the darkness, and you find your way back home. And a lot of this book is about this journey of like, we go out into the world just to find our way back home. And so that was hard simply because it was a year-long journey to get there, a year/a lifetime journey to get there. And what we're hearing from people is that those chapters are becoming some of their favorite in the entire book because they're unexpected. Honestly, they were unexpected for me. They're unexpected for the readers, because this is the moment where you expect it to be like, I broke free and I left and I just kept on flying, and, forget those people who did hard things. This actual like this turning around, repentance means to turn around and walk away from. And so this actual turning around and coming back to the place you started, to understand it in a way you never have before, and to make peace with the story, that was hard, simply because it took a long time to get there.
Oh, that was beautiful. Well, thank you so much. Do you know what the next book is going to look like? Like, have you thought about it?
Yeah, I better have, because it's due in January. So book 2 is the follow-up to Dirt, and it's going to be sort of like devotional style. We've not 100% settled on if it's going to be truly devotional, but it's going to be a series of essays. Right now we're thinking a 40-day devotional. We'll see how that shakes out. And it's going to be digging into more the teaching side of, okay, you've now sort of read the whole journey of how I moved from this place of striving and achieving and performing for my worth to a place of grace, freedom, and rest. And so this is going to be kind of like, let's dig in and let's actually start to talk about how you get to that place. Like, okay, but like, how do you do that, practically speaking? And so it will still have that same kind of writing style, and I'm really looking forward to digging into it, because my whole, journey with writing has been like, let me tell you a scene from my life and then tell you what you can take from it. So I kind of had to press pause on that side of writing while we were just getting like the whole memoir out there. So I think they'll go hand in hand, but they'll also stand alone, where if somebody picks up book 2 first, they'll be able to read it without having to go back and read Dirt necessarily in that order. But hopefully they will want to go back and read Dirt.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Mary, for spending time with us, for being so gracious and generous with your time, for letting us dig in to a little bit more of your story, the transition into the podcast host and author, and of course, sharing Dirt. So can you share with everybody where they can get the book, where they can connect with you? And I will definitely do a follow-up episode as soon as I finish the book, because I really cannot wait. It's amazing.
Oh, yay. I would actually love that. I think that would be amazing. Just like even like a solo episode of like your takeaways. That would be cool. Yes. Where can they find the book? Right. Thebookdirt.com is sort of the central hub where you can find all the things. And that is the THE book, BOOK, dirt, DIRT.com. I always say that, and people are like, dirt? And I'm like, yeah, like dirt, like on, like in the ground, like dirt. So that is the title, thebookdirt.com. You can find all the things with the book. And then I'm at Mary Marantz on all the socials. And I would love if you watch this and you took something from it, come over, DM me on Instagram. Let me know what you liked. If you read the book, let me know what you liked. I've been spending a lot of time hanging out in the DMs.
Awesome. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next episode.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you've received value, encouragement, and exactly what you need to help keep you in momentum to grow and impact the world around you. Big or small, we all make a difference. Thanks also for subscribing, downloading, and leaving a review. This helps us reach others who need this message in their life. If you know anyone who would benefit from this podcast, please share, so you and I can help more people boldly step into purpose. It is my heart's mission to help and encourage others. My internal belief that a rising tide lifts all ships. So much of what we talk about on the podcast is leading with value and building relationships through service. So we've created a collection of resources for you to continue growing, whether you are just getting started or ready to scale your business. Visit amplifymyimpact.com for show notes, downloads, programs, and more information about how to directly work with our team to amplify your impact and change the world.